Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're, of course, now here to talk a little bit of football. Of course, now we've come to the end of the regular season, about to start the playoffs, and my Broncos are back in it. Let's fucking go, baby. But, we'll have plenty of time for that. I'm sure there's going to be a Broncos talk in the works here. But, nonetheless, we're actually going to go a little to the East Coast, which it's a little further south than what the Broncos will be at this weekend, but nonetheless, we're going to talk real quick about Tyreek Hill. Of course, I'm a little bit late to this party. This is, as I mentioned in the previous video, one of the opportunities that I missed, but we're not missing it too badly. It's just really, really interesting because, with him actually actively having the rant that he did in, I guess, his little presser or whatever it was after the Dolphins were, of course, eliminated from the playoffs. I mean, it was just really weird because that game was going on simultaneous to the Chiefs' reserves against the Broncos and everything. I was watching both fairly closely, and it seemed like the Dolphins were actually competitive with, I believe it was Tyler, I'm not sure why I'm struggling with it, Tyler Huntley, there we go. It was Tyler Huntley that was starting at quarterback, and, I mean, again, it felt like it should have been a rather competitive game. You figured the Jets were going to try to play spoiler and everything. Of course, Cincinnati the night before got their end of the bargain done, and wound up beating Pittsburgh out in Pittsburgh. All they needed was for Miami and Denver to lose. Of course, only one of those things wound up happening, and this is what we got. Tyreek just wasn't having it, and he's talking about being up out of there. I don't know if I see that happening. I'm pretty sure he's on a deal that he was re-signed on earlier in the year, of course, on top of being named top number one on the top 100 by all of his peers. It just is really wild to see how much things have turned, and I don't know. I'm not really sure what this is going to boil down to. I'm sure the asking price for whatever trade there may be is going to be a lot higher than it needs to be, but I don't necessarily see him leaving Miami. But I don't know. Really, really wild stuff seeing that from him, but I mean, when you deal with losing enough. Anyway, moving on. Speaking of losing enough, of course, a lot of firings going around, and of course, one of which included a general manager in Rand Carthon, which, only familiarity that I know of with him is that he was in the league as a running back for a handful of years. Of course, clearly he managed to make it into general manager role. I'm not really sure what earned him that, but it's just really weird the Titans actually have the number one pick, but this guy will have nothing to do with that. And I find that incredibly intriguing. It seems as though Nashville is going to be the likely landing spot for one Shedeur Sanders. And of course, there's been talk a bit of a possible reuniting of him and Coach Prime, but I don't see Coach Prime leaving, so I think that can be ruled out, especially since they retained Brian Callahan, which, that's really interesting to see where that goes from there. I mean, it's really, really wild because it seems as though now Will Levis is going the way of Malik Willis, and oddly enough, he actually did pretty well in the Packers' season finale against the Bears, albeit last-second loss by field goal. I mean, I don't know. It is what it is, I guess, but all the same, it's just really an odd thing to see this happening. I'm not really sure what led to this. I mean, obviously you're going to have some shortcomings after a coaching change. It just, I really don't understand it, but nonetheless, it's going to be the kind of thing that happens. But a GM firing along with coaches, and they got the #1 pick. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But anyway, we're going to move on to the main topic of the video here, which is going to be coach firings. Of course, the latest one was Antonio Pierce today from the Las Vegas Raiders, and I honestly, I guess I get it, but I don't agree with it. I mean, it was one thing Jerod Mayo being fired. I can understand some of the underlining reasonings, and of course listening to Bob Kraft speak his piece on the situation the other day. It's sort of understandable there. This, on the other hand, it's literally a reach to me. Obviously, you got Tom Brady as a minority owner. Mike Vrabel is one of the hottest names out there. He's the one big name as far as, I guess, former or current head coaches that are out on the market right now. Of course, you got Mike McCarthy, who the Cowboys have granted the Chicago Bears permission to interview him, and that's going to be really interesting to see if the Bears end up going with McCarthy after firing Matt Eberflus. I mean, it's just really, really crazy. And let's think about this also, too, with all these firings that have gone on here. You know, I just wanted to go over that real quick. And it's not an overly lengthy list, but it's a list enough, you know. I mean, we're talking about Dennis Allen from the Saints. Of course, Eberflus, aforementioned, from the Chicago Bears. Jerod Mayo, just mentioned him. Doug Peterson. And, of course, all of this started with Robert Saleh. I mean, it's just really, really wild to see how all these things have unfolded. But, you know, this one with Antonio Pierce is, again, the one that I got to disagree with the most, because they started the season well enough, of course, wound up having it come apart as of the point that they wound up losing to the Broncos. I mean, it just wound up really going south for him from there. And I don't believe that that was necessarily his fault. You know, there were a lot of, you know, just mishandlings within the organization at that point. And then, of course, you got Davante Adams wanting out. He ends up with the Jets, and look how that ended up going. I don't know. You kind of expect it at the end of every season. I think it's really wild. And then the Bengals, of course, fired their defensive coordinator. Yikes, this is all I can think to say about that. Really interesting to see how these things move along. Of course, Vance Joseph from my Broncos is being talked about as, you know, one of the coaches as far as being granted permission to have interviews with the likes of the Jets and the Bears as well. So, it's going to be really interesting to see where all of this winds up just unfolding, or how this ends up unfolding. It just, I don't know, kind of wild seeing these things. It's not exactly like it's blowing my mind, but it's just, wrapping your head around it is something else sometimes. But yeah, I guess when you wind up not making the playoffs, you know, what can you say? But either way, that's pretty much all I got on that. Y'all know what it is. Like, share, subscribe. And I definitely appreciate y'all for coming through, as this has been your time with A&J, and I thank you for spending it with me.